Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to be talking about pregnancy and miscarriages and things like that. Just be rather blunt about it. I guess that's going to be the bulk of what we talk about. This is going to be a slightly more personal time because it has to do actually more with my personal life stuff that's been going on. If you guys are watching from the Discord server, or if you're familiar with the Discord server, you may recall that a while ago I reported that I was actually having a kid. There's kind of a story behind this, so I'll kind of back up. But I've been with Claudia for over a year now. I don't know. She's with me in the room again. She's playing with Maya. It's been a year and some time. It's been six months. A year and 6 months. It's been a year. It's been some time. There have been some dates. We started dating on a particular date, and it is now a different date. Some point in the future. So yeah. And anyway, though, so we were kind of at the point where we were starting to look at wedding rings and things like that. As Claudia was bringing up, like she would go online, and she'd be like, "What do you think of this engagement ring?" And so she was sort of like dropping those hints. She was like, "What do you think of this one? What do you think of that one?" We were talking about engagement rings and things like that. And not very long after she started doing that, about a month afterward, I think. I mean, we're both kind of getting there. We've been a little bit weird where neither of us, I think, have wanted to always be totally upfront with stuff. I mean, like, we're on the same page usually, but neither one of us wants to be the one to, like, take that leap and be like, okay, like, I'm ready to go to the next level. Like, Claudia and I didn't say that we loved each other until one night Claudia got really drunk. And so she was like lying there, and she's like, she just rolls over and she's like, "I love you." And I was like, "You're drunk." And she's like, "But I do." And I was like, well, I like, and I didn't want to reciprocate for sure, because I didn't want to, like, what if she was just really drunk, and then, like, the next morning she was going to feel really embarrassed and she was going to want to take it back. And I was like, well, we'll talk about this in the morning. She's like, no, to say it tonight. And I was like, well, I'll tell you in the morning. Like, we'll see how it feels in the morning. And I didn't want to, like, I wanted to, I don't know, I was concerned. I was pointlessly concerned. I did love her, and we loved each other. So so the next morning when we were both sober, I was like, yeah, so the whole love thing, yes, that's right, that's true. And so Claudia and I kind of have these moments of awkwardness with each other, and the marriage thing was kind of one of them, as we were sitting around talking about that. And my plan was to screw around and like, wait for like 6 months with my plan. I mean, like, there's a couple different ways that I can justify it in my head, but for the most part I was just dragging it out because she was starting to look at the engagement rings, and I figured, like, if I went out and I got an engagement ring like that week, that would be impulsive and silly. So I was just gonna wait. I was gonna wait for like half a year and then propose, and I guess there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's no rush or anything like that. But about a month after we kind of started looking at engagement rings and talking about this sort of idea, Claudia called me into the bathroom, and she was like really scared. She was just like, oh my God, Greg, go look in the bathroom. And I thought that there was like a giant spider in the bathtub or something like that. So I was like, why? What's going on? She's like, just look in the bathtub. Oh my God, just look in the bathtub. And she's like in the corner with like her hands over her mouth, like she'd backed up into the corner outside the bathroom. And she was just like, just go in there. And so I go in there, and like I go straight for the bathtub, because I assume, spiders, they really like the bathtubs. That's where it's going to be. And the bathtub actually was where I was supposed to go, but I was so intent on looking for a spider that I completely overlooked the pregnancy test that was sitting on the bathtub. It was positive. We had a positive pregnancy test. So Claudia was pregnant. And it was funny because we looked on the back, and it was like, she's like, what are the odds it's not correct? And it was like 99% accuracy. And she's like, I'm going to do another one. And so she took another one, because it comes with multiple tests, and that one came back positive too. And she was like, what's the probability that they were both wrong? And so there was kind of a bit of panic, but yeah, it sort of came up on us by surprise. And so you're probably wondering how exactly we got surprised by a pregnancy, because the two of us we're both worriers by nature. Claudia and I are both the type of people to just worry ourselves silly over, like, many things. We're very cautious types, where we're both very I would think of us both as being fairly responsible, but in this particular thing, we were not especially responsible. What had happened is that Claudia had an ex that she'd been with for about 7 years, and at some point during that relationship, she apparently got a little bit lazy with protection. And after that occurred, she never really got pregnant, so Claudia began to fear that she could not conceive children. And I remember telling her, like, she was like, let's just not wear protection. Like, let's just not wear protection. And I was like, like, you say that, but it's always like, every time I always hear, like, people who get pregnant by surprise, it's always from people who are like, oh yeah, I thought for whatever reason I couldn't get pregnant. And I told her, I was like, if I don't wear protection, you're going to get pregnant. And sure enough, there was a little bit of a tip-off for the whole thing, as I remember Claudia once commenting after one evening, and this is we're getting into very personal time territory, but she was like, man, your stuff seems really thin, your man stuff, and I was like, really? And so I sat down on the computer and I looked it up, like right after she said that, like I just got up and I walked over to the computer and I checked it, and it was like, yeah, if your stuff is really thick, and then what actually happens is the sperm has a tough time swimming through it, and if it's too thick, you're actually never going to be able to conceive because your sperm just can't get out of the semen. So I was kind of looking at that and I was like, oh, so your ex's stuff was like super thick and you couldn't get pregnant. And I told her that night, I was like, I think he might have been at fault here for this lack of conception. So he was shooting blanks. I'm apparently not. And anyway. So it was a bit of a panic, and we kind of weren't sure where we wanted to go. But we talked about it a few times before, around when we kind of quit using protection. I'd sort of talked to Claudia. I was like, so. How are you going to feel if we get pregnant? And we talked it out, and I'd sort of developed a mental map of like what we were going to do, how I was going to feel, what was going to be the pathway. And so I was on slightly firmer ground. So finding out that Claudia was pregnant, I was kind of more mentally prepared to handle it. And I was like, okay, all right. So we talked about this. And, it feels like it's long ago now, so I can't remember exactly. Like, it was much clearer in my head when we got to it, but now I'm a little bit muddy on where exactly, when and how exactly we decided on what we were going to do. But I know that there was definitely some pre-plans in my head. Claudia, however, was convinced she was never going to get pregnant, and so she was just completely, like, off her footing. She was just, she's just like, oh, no. So, I warmed up to the idea rather quickly, I think early on, we discussed previously, and we were like, well, if you do get pregnant, do you want to consider an abortion? Is that on the table? Do you want to go through with it? Like, what do you kind of want to do? And we both agreed that we're happy enough together, and we had enough confidence in each other that if a pregnancy did occur, that we wanted to see it through together. And so that continued to be the plan after we found out that Claudia was pregnant. And so there was a little bit of panic, and Claudia, for a little while, was really depressed because she told me, she's like, well, this is it. I'll never have fun again. I'll never do anything to bring me joy ever again. Like, this is the end of my young life, and I now transition into a period of being shackled to whatever happens when people have kids. And so she kind of had a little bit of a mourning period, a period of sadness, and I didn't really go through that so much myself. I had a little bit more of a panic. If anything, I wasn't like sad about it. I was more kind of like, oh man, like what do we do? So like I called my parents right away, I was not to tell her parents that we contacted my parents first, but it was really my fault. It wasn't that Claudia she wasn't ready to own up to it, but I was just like, oh, well, I think I'll go and I'll talk to someone right off of the bat and get some advice. And so I called my parents right away, and like my mom actually just happened to be in town like the day that we found out. So I was like, hey, Claudia's pregnant. Like, what do you do you have any advice or any thoughts about how we can prepare ourselves for this and this? And my mom was like, oh, like I'm in town like right now. And so she just came over to the house. She was there within like 5 minutes. I was surprised just how, like, they actually live, my family lives in the area, but they live kind of a ways away. So it was really just kind of weirdly coincidental that she happened to be there. And so my mom just kind of showed up in 5 minutes and she was like, hey guys, like, so you're having a baby. And so we sat around, we talked to her about, stuff we were going to need. We set out a list and we made some plans and kind of set up a game plan. And so my parents were kind of on board right away. I was concerned my dad was going to have his reservations because it kind of took me by surprise. And my dad, like myself and Claudia, is also kind of a worrier by nature. He worries about things. So I thought he was going to panic and just worry himself. But turns out my dad has gotten to an age where he's really excited about the prospect of grandkids. So he accepted it right away. My mom took it right away. And then Claudia told her siblings, while she grappled with exactly how she was going to explain to her parents that she accidentally got pregnant. Because Claudia's kind of the her brother hasn't gotten out of the school system, the education system yet. But Claudia's an engineer. She's a civil engineer. She's doing well. So she's one of the good kids in the family. She's got a couple of brothers and sisters, but she's the good kid. And so being the good kid, she didn't want to call her parents and be like, "Hey, I'm accidentally having a kid." And so they wound up actually. They I don't believe that they've been informed at all, even to this point. Yes. So yes. Not out of spite. Claudia was just afraid. As the good kid, she didn't want to let her parents down. So she told her siblings, and her brother was really excited for us, and so was her sister. And I think, did Nadia offer to babysit for us? She did. She also offered to clean our apartment, but I think she wanted, she was also looking for work in that capacity. She wanted a wage for that, and, But anyway, though, yeah. So we kind of got in touch with the family and everything like that, and over time, over a week or so, I believe that we warmed up to the idea. There was a little bit of turbulence at first. Claudia kind of, she was depressed sometimes about it, and then kind of more upbeat, and, I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of a naturally more, like I'm generally content most of the time, I feel like, and so I had my fears, but for the most part, I was enthusiastic and was worried. There was some touch and go times. I'd try to check up with Claudia, and we kind of had those things where we do sometimes. It was like, well, how are you feeling? And she would say, like, well, I don't, like, you seem really happy. Like, I don't want you to be unhappy. And I was like, well, I don't want to be happy if you're not happy. But at the same time, I didn't want to, like, drop the enthusiasm, because then if we're both, like, sad, then it would be really hard for us to both, like, come out of that and be happy. So, like, if both of us... So I was kind of like, so I don't know, I'll keep up my enthusiasm for it, but also, like, I'm really concerned about your feelings, and I really want you to feel good about this, so... I don't know, there was a little bit of, complicated, politics there between us as far as how things were going, but as time passed, we both kind of warmed up to the idea. And so then we started to kind of seriously make plans for the kid. We picked out names. I think Murphy was something that we liked for a girl because Claudia really likes the movie Interstellar. It's one of her favorite movies. And so there's the character, the main female lead of that movie, or one of the main female leads, aside from, I think, Anne Hathaway is like, aside from her. The one who stays at home, her name is Murphy. And we thought that was actually kind of an interesting name. It's different, but still kind of outstanding, and so I kind of like that. We had another one that we thought of. I don't remember what it was. Yeah, for a girl. There was Murphy and Emma. Yeah, Emma. I can't remember how we got to that. I think it's because I was joking, like, what if we have a boy, can we name him Daniel Radcliffe? And then Claudia was like, no, we can't name him Daniel Radcliffe just because he played Harry Potter. And I was like, what about Emma Watson? Like, can we name the kid Emma? And then I think Claudia was like, actually, Emma's not a bad name. Oh, right, we couldn't do Daniel because your brother's name is Daniel. Yeah. And the middle name has to be Daniel. And it would have been silly to name them Daniel. But I think for a boy, we were thinking about, like, Max. Because Max Daniel sounded like a very, it was like totally rad name. We had less of a like an interesting name idea for the boys, but for girl we had Murphy or Emma, and those were both kind of like interesting, and we liked those names. Yeah, but anyway though, so the whole like the thing that we found out though right away though is we tried to get in contact with doctors again. both being the worrying type, we wanted to be on top of things and keep track of things as well as we can. And what you find out with your first pregnancy is that the doctors can't really help you at all for the whole first trimester. There's really nothing they can do. Like, they can't do an ultrasound, they can't like put a probe up there and have a look. There's nothing that they can really check on. Like, for a long time, Claudia had this thing that was supposed to be tracking the development of the baby, and like everything that it said, it was like it kept comparing them to the size of like fruits, which was really funny. It was like, now currently it's the size of a raspberry seed, and now it's the size of a raspberry. Now it should be about the size of a grape. Like, I don't know, it just kept going like fruits, like a big, I'm really talking like a big raspberry or a little raspberry, I don't know. Like, you know, eventually the child becomes the size of an orange, and then, you know, maybe like a cantaloupe. And I think that's when you're a cantaloupe, and I think you give birth to a cantaloupe. Like, you know, volume size. Like, they're not like a spherical, but volume-wise, they're like the size of a cantaloupe. I don't know. Maybe like a small watermelon? Maybe like a collection. Maybe like they would give it like, you know, it's like a collection of like, I don't know, 2 bananas and 3 apples. That's the volume of a child when you're finally ready to give birth. So anyway, though, yeah. Yes, shoot, so where I was with... Yeah, so we tried to call, like, we called the doctor and we were like, hey, like, can you tell us what to do? And the doctors were like, we can tell you nothing. They were like, don't call us until 8 weeks in, wasn't it? Yeah, so like 2 months in. They were like, don't call us until about 2 months in. And so we were like, well, all right, I guess we'll not call them until 2 months in. And so we found on the internet, and it turns out there's lots of people who are in this situation. Unless you have trouble conceiving, the doctors generally won't keep a close eye on you while you're in the early stages of a pregnancy. So, but there was also kind of alarming because we started looking up like again, worriers. We started looking up like all the different things that could go wrong, and we were like looking up like, and then once the baby comes, like what are all the ways the baby could be in danger once it's there? And this thing, like I was looking up like SIDS, like what causes SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, things like that. But we found out that a miscarriage is incredibly common. Like as far as like whether or not it'll happen before the second trimester, it's like a 1 in 4 chance or something very, very high like that, much higher than you think it was. And yeah, so we were kind of looking at that and we were like, oh man, well, like there was like this chart that showed like, you know, the average dropped off the further along you got into it, but it was still pretty high for the first trimester. So yes, my parents continued to get excited with us. My mom got us like this baby book and like I think like a guide to being a dad or something like that. It was a book. It was like kind of a comedic book on like fatherhood and things like that. And incidentally, that's also why I started to grow this mustache. You see, because my dad has a mustache, and when I was a baby, that was when he thought that there was a good time to experiment with facial hair. Because, you know, like your kids will grow up. Like, I've actually seen this video that I think is really funny, where this dad has like this beard throughout his kid's entire life, and then like he shaves off his beard, and like his child doesn't recognize him anymore because the child is so used to dad having a beard. Like the child cries because like the child kind of knows it's like dad, but it's like weird and doesn't look like dad. So, you know, you grow that facial, like if you have a mustache, you don't have a mustache, like your child will grow up and like that's the face that they associate with. And so my dad, when I was born, shaved off his mustache. Like he'd always had a mustache. My dad has a thinner lip than I do. So he always felt that he looked really good with the mustache. But then when I was born, he thought like, well, now it's time to do some shakeups, you know, some life things are changing. So he shaved off his mustache. And so you can see like when I'm really little, like home video or pictures of when I'm like really young, my dad has no mustache. And to me that looked really weird because my dad apparently decided that not having a mustache did not look good at all. And so he grew it back. You know, so for a little while he didn't have a mustache and then he grew it back. And so now whenever I think of my dad, I think of a mustache. And I associate mustaches with, you know, dads. And so I figured, well, if I'm going to be a dad, I should try to grow out a mustache. And part of it was because I think that I hadn't shaved in a little bit. Like it'd been like 2 days and I'd been lazy and I hadn't shaved. And Claudia was like, you should just try to grow it out. And I said, you know, I've tried before, but I always give up within like 2 weeks. And you know what? This is a big life event. I may as well grow out the mustache, so that way, like our marriage and it'll be just like with my dad. Like we'll have like all these pictures of like when the baby was like really little, of like me with the mustache, and then like my kid will see these and like I'll always be shaved because the mustache maybe won't look very good. I'll do the same thing my dad did and be like, the old ways were best, and go back. but the kid will just be like, man, like, what is this with this mustache, Dad? And I'll be like, oh, well, you know, I just had a kid and I thought it was a great time to grow a mustache because that's where your dad powers come from, the mustache. So yes, that's where I started growing out this mustache. It takes about 3 months for it to grow in. I'm still going to keep growing it out. I'm going to get it to a full mustache, and we'll see how it goes. I just got a haircut, and I'm hoping that maybe the cleaner look helps it look a little bit less silly. But as it gets thicker, maybe it'll kind of look better. I don't know. I would still have to trim it and so on and so forth. We're still going to go with this mustache, guys. I get so far since I started trying to grow this thing, like the majority of the comments on the video have been about the mustache. But I'm not shaving it off yet. Like, if it's a mistake, it's a mistake I'm committed to, at least until I get it all the way there, and then I'll shave it off if I decide it doesn't look good. But I mean, I'm told it makes me look more my age. So, like, I normally look very young. A lot of people sometimes still think I'm a teenager. So, with the mustache, I look like an adult. So yes. Anyway, though, right. So, yeah. So, my mom got really excited, and she saw this, like, crib. And it was actually a nice crib at a garage sale. And so, she bought, like, this crib and everything like that. But then, unfortunately, we ran into some trouble. Claudia started to develop some bleeding, and we'd had a little bit of spotting before, and that's actually very common. There's a lot of things that are common. This was one of the most frustrating things, is anytime you look up, like, a medical problem, you know, you always find, like, oh, these symptoms could be a sign of the worst. And, like, bleeding actually does occur during a pregnancy. It's fairly normal. But Claudia started to develop bleeding, and then the bleeding became clotting, and the bleeding got worse, and so we contacted the doctor, and we had to go in and talk to them about the whole thing. And just like previously, they really, like, it was too early on in the pregnancy. We were almost at the second trimester, but we hadn't quite made it. We got pretty close. So the doctor kind of, like, there still wasn't anything to look at, because before the second trimester, there's no heartbeat, there's not really anything that shows up in the ultrasound. The doctor said that they could do an ultrasound, but the ultrasound tends not to be very conclusive of anything, because if there was no heartbeat in the first place, you know, it's like you'd be looking for a heartbeat to see if the baby's still alive, but if the heart never formed, or if the heart hasn't formed, then, you know, you can't check for that. There's nothing to compare to. So what they wound up doing is they had to take a blood test, and like I say, they could tell us nothing. It's funny, the new season of BoJack came out, and they have this whole arc with, like, Princess Carolyn trying to get pregnant, and then struggling with, like, she gets pregnant, she has, like, a miscarriage, and they talk to a doctor, and, like, the doctor's like, oh, I can't tell you why you had a miscarriage. He's like, maybe you upset a leprechaun, maybe you angered an ancient god. And I mean, the doctor was far more sympathetic than that, but I mean, basically, that was the kind of, like, as far as the useful levels of information she was able to give us, she really did just kind of say, like, no one knows why you had a miscarriage. Like, maybe you angered a leprechaun. Maybe one of the Greek gods is furious with you. Like, maybe you should make a sacrifice to Poseidon before you try again. I'm just saying, you had a miscarriage. And the doctor was really sure about it, and so it was kind of an emotional time in the office, because by that point we'd both grown fairly committed to the idea of having a child. We'd gotten to the point where we were excited about it, we were looking forward to it, and, you know, making plans and everything else. And yes, so the doctor, she goes, yeah, you were pregnant. Like, I can confirm you were definitely pregnant. There was a baby, you've lost it, we can't tell you why, we can't provide you with any information or any kind of help. Like, the whole first trimester, you're just, man, just totally in the dark. It was surprising how little they can do at that period. And yeah, there wasn't really anything that they could say about why it happened. They also don't really, like I say, because it's so common, on your first miscarriage, there's really nothing that they do. So Claudia and I, we'd like to try again. This is kind of what we got attached to the idea enough that afterward we said, well, now that we know that you can get pregnant, should we try to avoid a second pregnancy, or should we maybe just kind of see what happened? And so at this point, we're both kind of, you know, we're going to see what happens, and we might try, you know, we'll kind of, not exactly trying again, but we'll maybe, if we have another chance at it, then we'll be excited for that. But yeah, it wouldn't be until we have, like, a repeat instance, I think by your third miscarriage, or after the second miscarriage? So after the second, the doctor will start to follow you a little bit more closely. But after the first one, it's common enough that they really won't, apparently it's not that big of a deal. I guess I would have to figure out, like, what's the math on, like, what are the odds that you would have a miscarriage twice? It's like 0.25 times 0.25, like a quarter of a quarter. That's how you figure out that math? Quarter of a quarter? An eighth? No. A 16th? Thank you, you're better at math. A 16th? Yeah, 1 in 16 odds. Which is still kind of high, if you think about it. But, it's not as high. It's not as high as 1 in 20. Or 1 in 4. Yes, so anyway, though. The pregnancy wound up not panning out very much, and it's kind of weird. It was sad. She and I both took time for each other. We spent the day together and cheered each other up and kind of made peace with the loss and everything like that. And it's sad because it's a loss, but it's not as profoundly sad, I think, as some people might think it is. I don't know, or maybe it just wasn't as bad for Claudia and I because it was an unexpected pregnancy, and we weren't really kind of came up on us by surprise, and then we sort of lost it by surprise. So the whole thing was just a series of surprises, and But my parents, my mom, I think in particular, seemed to take it a little bit harder than Claudia and I did. My mom was still holding on to hope. She wasn't ready to let go. Like, Claudia and I were making peace with it after the first doctor visit, but my mom was like, no, wait till the blood test. Maybe you still have it. Maybe it's still okay. And she was, like, sending us all these, she was sending us texts and things like that, and she was like, I need updates. Like, tell me what's going on. And we were like, Mom, like, we don't know yet. You just have to wait, okay? Like, this whole thing is just an agonizing series of non-information. Like, that's the whole first trimester. It's just nothing but non-information. And that was actually the worst part, is it wasn't... I feel like that's the thing that maybe, like, you think, like, oh, you're really sad about the loss, but the stress doesn't really come... I mean, there's stress from the loss, but a lot of the stress comes from the uncertainty. Like, just the sheer amount of nothing that you know. Like I say, like, you look up stuff and you see, like, women... there's even times, there's occasions... And the doctor did mention this, where, like, some women will have a miscarriage, but they were carrying twins, so they actually lose one baby and then the other one goes to term. So yes, but I guess one of the leading causes of a miscarriage, though, is like a abnormality during development. So it was right about that time when the baby should have been forming a heart. So my guess is, and it's just a guess because we know nothing, my guess is that maybe as the heart started to form, something happened and it didn't form correctly, I guess, and so maybe the pregnancy just was no longer viable. But, yeah, I think that more or less sums it up. Like I say, my mom was about a week or two behind us in terms of the grieving process. So by the time that Claudia and I were sort of over it, my mom was just sending us flowers to help us feel better. And one of the things that I thought was really funny, and this is a little bit dark, but it was our miscarriage, okay? So I can make this joke. This is a little bit dark, but on the package on the flowers was like a plastic bag, and they were like, warning, may cause death in children. And so I had a really good laugh about that. And that the flowers my mom sent us to make us feel better about our miscarriage had a warning about the death of children on it. And and so, like I said, my mom was still kind of in the grieving process, but she was like, did you get my flowers? And I replied, and I was like, yeah, and on the package. And my mom was like, that is not okay. And I was like, listen... Claudia and I had a pretty solid laugh out of that. So, I mean, in fairness, it did help make light of the situation. It made us feel better. So, every individual has their own way of coping, and I prefer comedy. So, yeah. Thanks for the flowers, though, Mom. That's appreciated. And yeah. So there was that. But anyway, though, in the process of this, like I said, we did come around to the idea that Claudia, we actually wound up, I think, coming away closer to the end of it all, because, like I say, we'd always been a little bit, the two of us, we'd always been a little bit cautious. Like I say, we had to get drunk before we confessed love to each other and things like that, and we had to Claudia had to become pregnant before she and I both kind of admitted that, okay, like, I actually really kind of do want to spend my life with you. I mean, like, we'd sort of been talking about it, but it had been that sort of, like, aloof, like, non-committal, like, playing it cool kind of way of, like, oh, just look at these engagement rings. We would have gotten there eventually, but, like I said, my plan was just be, like, aloof and playing it cool for, like, 6 months and then get into it, but with the pregnancy, it was kind of like, you know, it didn't seem appropriate to be aloof anymore, and we were a little bit more forward. We kind of talked more about what we wanted, you know, in the long term and from each other. And, you know, are you excited with this, or maybe excited to be in a committed thing with me? And yeah, there was no fear or misgivings of that. Claudia's great. She's been a real uplifting part of my life, and, you know, is making my days brighter, making me much happier. I like to see her every day and everything. So yeah, so we're getting married. That's the other thing too, is we've been discussing how exactly we want to go through with the marriage. We both have kind of a non-traditional view on this, but I think I'm the most non-traditional of the two of us. Claudia is one of those girls who has put a lot of time thinking about, like, her wedding and, like, how she wants her wedding to go, and I'm kind of looking at it more as, like, well, you know, the wedding is a legal procedure first and foremost, and then the ceremony is, like, your celebration. And so this place we're at right now is, I think we're going to go into, like, the courthouse. We're going to get the legal stuff just taken care of, and so we'll be officially married. But then we're going to do the ceremony a year afterward, so that we have time to kind of prepare and get some money together and everything else, shore up some cash for the ceremony. And then the ceremony will be kind of like the celebration of our marriage. And because we're doing it this way, we're sort of non-traditional, and that means that we kind of have options. And, like, so my dad was joking a little bit, like, we were talking to my dad about these plans. We were like, yeah, like, honeymoon options and this and that. And my dad was like, oh, he gave a place. I can't remember, was it Zion that he wanted to go see? And my dad's like, maybe your mom and I'll come with you. And I was like, I don't think that you're supposed to do that traditionally. And he's like, you're already way outside tradition with your current plans. and he was like, we may as well just hang out. Like, we'll leave you guys be, but I really want to go see Zion. And so, yeah. But our current plans, yeah, we're kind of looking at, like, there's a place we can rent out in the park. There's a really nice park out where we live, and so we might go out to this park and then have kind of like a family thing. And we're trying to figure out, since Claudia's family is from Mexico, we're either going to have a little wedding, or we're going to invite the entirety of Mexico out to this park. like all of Oaxaca is just going to come up and visit us here. All of Mexico City, everywhere. We'll get El Mijo del Santo? What was it? El Mijo del Santo? El Hijo del Santo. Yeah, the son of El Santo. He'll come out and he'll you know, there's all of Mexico. It'll be cool. It'll be great. I'm looking forward to seeing him. We don't actually know him. But yeah, I was promised all of Mexico. So anyway, though, so yeah, we're gonna do that. Our plan is pizza buffet and cake with no frosting. The pizza buffet, like the pizza buffet was kind of a joke at first, but then I thought it was sort of weird and different, and probably no one else does that, and so it would be kind of memorable, if strange. And the cake with no frosting is because Claudia finds that frosting is a little too sweet, it's a little too rich, and I can sympathize with that. I kind of agree. Like, a little too much frosting sort of ruins a cake, so a cake with no frosting does sound kind of alright, because then you get the nice, like, cake part of the cake. The problem is, though, the frosting is a preservative, and you're supposed to keep the cake topper for a year, and then eat it a year afterward as your anniversary. Although, technically, the ceremony is going to be our 1-year anniversary, so maybe we should just eat the cake top during the wedding ceremony. So, yeah, so maybe it's not a big deal, I don't know. But yeah, frostingless cake. And I don't know if we can think of any other weird things that'll just, like, make our wedding stand way out. That would be fun, and that would be good. But yeah. So Claudia and I are gonna get married. She's got the engagement ring currently. We've also got the wedding bands picked out and everything else, and we're probably gonna get married this month, at least in the legal sense. Then we're gonna do the ceremony like a year later, and yeah. There's some pragmatic reasons for getting married too. We kind of talked about this a little bit. I sucked the fun out of the wedding stuff a bit, me being the analytical guy I was. because we started talking about like, oh yeah, the marriage, and I was like, yeah, you know, the tax bracket stuff, and I was like really focused on like the taxes and like the legal ramifications of like what does a marriage actually do, you know, practical on a pragmatic level. And there are some pragmatic advantages. We think that we'll save a lot of money. Claudia can have a family insurance plan, and so like right now I'm on Obamacare. And that's like for me, man, I don't know what it is, like $200 a month or something like that. I think if I round up, like you get the subsidies, but they're kind of, I think the Trump administration cut some of the subsidies out or something. I don't know exactly. I saw some things about it, but I'm not sure what the details are. Whatever the case, the whole thing's all kind of murky and unstable, and I'm not, you know, I'm still paying a lot of money, and I have like a $6,000 deductible on top of that. So Obamacare doesn't really offer fantastic plans. I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess, if I ever had to go to the hospital, but I haven't yet. Someday I will. But, oh, that reminds me. Yeah, the pregnancy. How much did we find out that it was going to be just to, like, do the delivery? That, like, it didn't even include the hospital stay? Like, $2,000 or $6,000? Yeah, we found out that just, like, delivering the baby, like, flat cost, like, base cost was going to be $6,000 before insurance. Like, man. And that's one of those things, man, like the medical industry, geez, like you can't just not have a baby. Like you can't just be like, well, we'll just keep it in, you know, until we have enough money to afford that. It's kind of like, geez, $6,000. Wow. And we can't stop you. Like you're just, man, life and death situation. It just drives me crazy the way our medical system works. Like life and death, and they just get to tell you what the price is. Like, here's what you're going to pay. And it's just like, man, are we really going to have to? Okay. All right. I guess you'll hand it off to debt collectors if we don't. It's just evil. It's like King John type stuff. You know, where's our Robin Hood? Why do we not have a man in green tights? I don't know who he'd rob. I feel like the corporation is much more complicated than the olden days of just robbing the tax collector, isn't it? Like, you can't just go and you can just, like, rob the tax collector. Because if you rob the hospital, I mean, like, do you really feel like... Because where does it stop? Like, who's really making bank here? Like, I mean, I know the drug companies are like, who would Robin Hood have to rob? Would it be the drug companies? Be the drug companies and the medical device manufacturers? But no, he would only have to rob just enough that they can still, you know, make medicine. He just got to skim off the top, you know. Skim off the top, get back to the port. Where is our modern Robin Hood? Yeah. It just, I don't know. Like I said, it just feels like Little John stuff. It just feels like the tax collectors come and shake it. You know, they just shake us down when you read those kind of numbers. But yes. So anyway, so that's where we're at. I say a little bit more of a personal time. Some ups and some downs. You know, sad, but I don't know. We came away. I feel like we came way closer. Yeah, we're committed to each other. We worked well. We worked well together. Yeah. So yes. Anyway, I suppose that'll be it for today. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll catch you all next time.